It was supposed to be a simple deposit of Mrs. Karoline Leavitt, but inside the marble walls of that Washington, D.C. bank, justice froze and the truth was quietly put on trial. This story will surprise you with the behavior of White House spokesperson Karoline. Let's wait and see, and I will start right now. The afternoon sunlight shimmered against the polished glass doors of Common Unity Bank, a prestigious institution nestled between DC's monuments of power and politics. Karoline Leavitt stepped out of her rideshare, heels tapping purposefully on the granite pavement. She looked composed, but there was a softness in her smile. She wasn't here for war. Just a quick errand, a peaceful afternoon, and then home to her son. In her hand, a manila folder held the essentials, a $50,000 check from her husband Nicholas Riccio's real estate company for a major community development project. Nothing secret, nothing unusual, just business. But as she entered the bank, something shifted. The interior gleamed with liberal branding, rainbow stickers beside Diversity First banners, pamphlets about inclusive banking sat in clear displays. The irony wasn't lost on her. Still, Karoline wasn't here to debate. She was here to bank. Approaching the counter, she smiled gently at the teller. "Hi there. I'm here to deposit this check on behalf of my husband's company. Everything's in order. I've included the contract and authorization letter inside." Behind the glass stood Elizabeth Carter, a woman in her early 40s, hair pulled tight, a designer pin shaped like a blue wave gleaming on her collar. Elizabeth took the check with a clinical hand, then froze. Her brow furrowed. Her eyes flicked to the name, then to Karoline's face. Recognition bloomed. Not the warm kind. Not the, "Oh, I know you from TV" kind. This was different. Colder. Sharper. "Leavitt," Elizabeth said aloud, her voice crisp and cutting. "As in, Karoline Leavitt? The Trump girl?" The tone wasn't curious. It was accusatory. Karoline's spine stiffened slightly. She offered a polite nod. Used to being recognized. Used to the shift that came with it. "Yes, that's me. This check is for our team's community housing initiative." 50,000? Elizabeth repeated, too loud. Her voice rose just enough for heads to turn. "That's a rather large amount, especially for someone like you." The words echoed. Someone like you. In that moment, the gleaming bank turned hostile. Karoline inhaled slowly, her heart picking up pace. Her hands, steady as stone on debate stages and press podiums, now tightened around her purse. She remembered briefings that had turned brutal, rooms full of cameras aimed like weapons. But this was different. This was subtle warfare, waged through whispers and fake smiles, waged by someone in uniformed authority with plausible deniability. "Everything's here," Karoline replied, keeping her tone steady. "You'll find the contract, ID, and company authorization letter. The funds are clean from a verified business account." Elizabeth's lips twitched, like someone trying not to smirk. She didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, she turned, without a word, and whispered to a younger colleague nearby. The girl, hair-dyed seafoam green, gave Karoline a once-over, then laughed under her breath. Karoline stood silently, dignified, determined, but not unmoved. She could feel the eyes. One man in line adjusted his coat awkwardly. A woman holding a tote bag with a "Vote Blue No Matter Who" sticker shook her head. And all around her, the DEI signs on the wall suddenly felt like decoration, not principle. She wasn't being judged by her documents. She was being judged for who she was, for what she believed. Elizabeth returned. She didn't sit. She didn't apologize. "This will require additional verification," she said slowly, as if reading from a script she was writing in real time. "We've had some issues lately with accounts connected to controversial donors." Karoline blinked. Are you suggesting this is political? I didn't say that, Elizabeth replied, her voice sugary. We just take precautions with high-risk individuals. The insinuation was razor sharp. Karoline clenched her jaw. In her mind, she saw a flash of Nico, her son, laughing on the carpet back home. She thought of Nicholas, always reminding her, let them push. You don't fall. You document. So she pulled out her phone, opened the Notes app, began to type, 3:04 p.m. Teller Elizabeth Carter refuses to process verified deposit. All paperwork in order. Commented on political affiliation. She lifted her head. I'd like a receipt of this interaction, Karoline said calmly, including a timestamp and the reason for delay. Elizabeth blinked. We don't do that. Then I'll wait for the manager. He's busy, came the sharp reply, and you're free to leave. Karoline stood straighter. She didn't yell. She didn't fold. I'll wait. And there she stood, alone, visible, yet unseen, a former White House press secretary, a mother, a wife, a patriot, and now just a woman trying to deposit a check in a country that claimed to welcome all, but didn't always mean it. The silence around Karoline wasn't the peaceful kind. It was thick, suspicious, the kind of silence that isn't empty. It's crowded with judgment, the kind that grows in rooms where people watch, whisper, and wonder who you really are. Karoline remained at the teller's window, standing tall with grace honed from years at podiums and press rooms. But even grace couldn't prevent the sting of injustice. Her fingers, once tapping confidently on microphones while facing White House correspondents, now tightened slightly on her phone. The screen still glowed with her notes, each line a quiet act of defense. 3:07 p.m., she typed. No movement. No paperwork reviewed. Employee Sarah now joining conversation. They're both laughing. Unprofessional tone. Public viewing. A middle-aged woman behind her cleared her throat. Loudly. Are you going to take all day? The woman asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was performative, designed for others to hear. Karoline turned slowly, offering a polite nod. There seems to be a delay. I'm happy to wait. The woman scoffed, turning to a man beside her who wore a shirt with the words Planet Over Profits. He shook his head, his gaze lingering too long, not because he didn't recognize her, but because he did. Elizabeth leaned on the counter now, her arms folded in false authority. You can have a seat, Miss Leavitt, she said with forced sweetness. This may take a while. I'll stay right here, Karoline answered, calm, unmoved. Transparency is important. Those words, deliberately chosen, sparked a ripple through the nearby line. One man adjusted his tie, suddenly uncomfortable. Another, a young woman with a bright pink tote, muttered under her breath, Privilege doesn't mean transparency. Karoline let it slide. She'd heard worse, much worse. But what she couldn't let slide was the pattern she began to observe. At 3:09, an older couple entered the bank. They weren't flashy, gray hair, simple clothes, but Elizabeth's demeanor transformed. Her eyes lit up. Her voice changed. She stood upright, beaming like a hostess in a five-star hotel. Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Gable. Come right this way. The velvet rope at the VIP desk was quietly pulled open. Tea offered. Smiles exchanged. Meanwhile, Karoline stood unacknowledged. The same Elizabeth who had refused her basic courtesy now bowed her head like a servant. Another tick in her phone. 3:10 p.m. Elderly couple enters. Immediate service. Smiles, hospitality, not asked for additional ID. She leaned slightly to one side, catching the reflection of Sarah, the green-haired colleague, in the polished metal of the counter. Sarah wasn't doing much work, but she was watching Karoline, with a smirk that was both amused and smug. Every few minutes she'd whisper something to another colleague, giggle, then glance back. Karoline didn't react, but inside, a quiet ache. She thought of her son Nico, still too young to understand politics or prejudice. She thought of the America she wanted him to inherit, where character mattered more than affiliation, where respect was earned, not weaponized. "I'm sorry," Karoline said aloud. "Is there someone else I can speak to about this deposit?" Elizabeth didn't look up from her screen. "You're speaking to me." Karoline offered a tight smile. "Then can you explain what, specifically, needs additional verification?" Elizabeth tilted her head. "Just procedures." "Which ones?" A pause, a glance at Sarah. "The ones for non-standard clients." The words sank deep. Caroline's face didn't change, but her hands did. She opened her phone again. 3:14 p.m., classified as non-standard client, no explanation. Then she saw it, out of the corner of her eye. Mark, the same young bank employee from earlier. He walked past the back of the lobby carrying a stack of paperwork. Their eyes met. Just for a moment. And he nodded. Just once. It was tiny, subtle, but Karoline knew it was deliberate. A silent apology, a signal. Not everyone here was against her. Not everyone was blind. She watched as Mark paused at another terminal. He looked at her paperwork, briefly, then at Elizabeth. Karoline saw the tension between them. He said something. Elizabeth snapped back. He didn't push, but his eyes told the story. He knew. He saw it. That small glimmer of humanity gave her breath, gave her patience. And then, a man in a hoodie walked in, unshaven, casual, a faded t-shirt with the words "Defend Truth" printed across the chest. He walked directly to Sarah's counter. "I'm here to open a new account," he said. "Of course," Sarah smiled. "Happy to help." Karoline waited, expecting him to be handed forms, asked for documents. But Sarah leaned in. "What's the name you'd like the account under?" she asked with a grin. He answered. She typed. "No ID yet. No wait. Just service." 3:19 p.m., Karoline typed. "New customer. No delay. No background. Immediate welcome." She looked up again. "Excuse me," she said softly but firmly. "How long should I expect to wait?" Elizabeth looked up again, this time annoyed. "You'll be contacted when your check clears our review protocols." "And that usually takes?" "As long as it takes." Karoline sighed quietly. She wasn't surprised, but she was saddened, not just for herself, but for what it meant. This wasn't about her check. It wasn't about risk management. It was about who she was, who she represented, her values, her beliefs. And for Elizabeth Carter, that made her dangerous. She knew it. 3:23 p.m., still no processing, still no justification, and still she waited. But then the door opened, and everything shifted. The ticking of the wall clock echoed through the marble hall like a courtroom metronome, steady, merciless. Karoline stood still, an island of composure in a sea of hypocrisy. But deep inside, her spirit was burning. She glanced down at her phone again, her fingers poised. Every line in her notes app felt heavier, more urgent. 3:25 p.m. Still no progress. Unjustified delay. Bias confirmed. Witnessed unequal treatment of 4 other clients. Suddenly, the front doors opened. A gust of wind slipped in behind a man in a slate gray suit. His shoes echoed confidently on the marble. His posture was sharp, too sharp. Karoline didn't recognize his face at first, but something in his movement was familiar. Elizabeth spotted him instantly. Her posture changed. No longer rigid and dismissive, now eager, accommodating, performative. "Mr. Thornton," she beamed, her voice syrupy. "It's an honor." Karoline's heart skipped. Thornton. James Thornton. She had heard that name whispered during her husband's late-night business calls, always followed by tension, by words like competitive acquisition, sabotage, or blocked zoning approval. James Thornton wasn't just a rival. He was the rival, the man whose company had tried to kill Nicholas Riccio's last two deals with suspicious timing and shadowy backroom lobbying. Karoline shifted her weight, casually but strategically, so she could observe without drawing too much attention. Elizabeth motioned Thornton toward a side hallway. Not a transaction desk, not a conference room, a corner, half hidden, poorly lit. She leaned in, speaking in low tones. Karoline's pulse quickened. She turned on her phone's camera. No sound, no flash. She zoomed in, focused. In Elizabeth's hand, barely visible between her fingers, was a small USB drive. Its label? Confidential. She passed it to Thornton like a secret handshake. Subtle but unmistakable. Thornton pocketed it with a tight smile. I appreciate it, he murmured. Karoline didn't catch everything, but she caught enough. She took 3 photos. 1, 2, 3, each clearer than the last. 3:29 p.m., she typed. USB labeled confidential passed from Elizabeth Carter to James Thornton. Witnessed handoff. No bank security protocol observed. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about her husband's livelihood, her family, their future, and someone, Elizabeth, had crossed a line. Thornton turned to leave, his gait casual, but Elizabeth tugged his sleeve, whispered something else. Karoline strained to listen. Rio Project. Can't know. She's here, Elizabeth hissed, and Karoline's blood ran cold. Rio. The name of Nicholas's new development. Her eyes widened. This wasn't just random hostility. It was deliberate, a coordinated effort to block Nicholas's funding through her. She backed away slightly, hiding her phone. Her brain raced through options. She couldn't confront yet, not without more. So she observed. Sarah, Elizabeth's green-haired accomplice, slid closer to the hallway. A lookout, clearly. She peered toward Karoline occasionally, but her expression said it all. You're not part of our club. Karoline exhaled slowly. You're not just biased, you're part of something bigger. She looked around the bank again. Mark was nearby, sorting folders at a side desk. Their eyes met once more. He raised an eyebrow as if to ask, Do you need help? Karoline gave the smallest nod. Then, Elizabeth returned to the front counter, her usual smug mask back in place. But this time, it was cracked. Karoline could see it. Still here? Elizabeth asked, her voice fake sweet again. We're doing our best, but these things take time. Karoline said nothing. She didn't need to. The photos in her phone now held the truth. And truth? It had teeth. 10 minutes passed. The whispers in the bank grew louder. 2 more customers entered. One woman in a climate justice t-shirt was immediately ushered into the side room. Another man wearing a small American flag pin was told to wait. Karoline logged both in her notes. Her thumb hovered over send on a message to Nicholas. Need you, but not yet. She deleted it. This was still her fight. For now, until the door opened again. And this time, it wasn't just a man who entered. It was gravity. Nicholas Riccio stepped into the room like a storm front in a suit. Tall, centered, calm, but with a presence that pulled all eyes toward him. Even the ambient noise in the bank shifted. Conversations stalled. A few people straightened their backs. Elizabeth's head snapped up. Her confident expression faltered. Her hand gripped the edge of her counter. Mr. Riccio, she began, her voice rising. What a surprise. We're, just working through. Nicholas didn't address her. He walked directly to Karoline. Are you okay? He asked, his voice low and steady. She nodded, handing him her phone. He saw the photos, read the notes. His eyes darkened, not with fear, but with focus. You're sure that's Thornton? Positive, she whispered. He exhaled, then looked up. His voice rose, not loud but resonant. "I'd like to speak to the bank manager." Elizabeth opened her mouth, but Nicholas silenced her with a single gesture. "Now." From the back office, Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, emerged, balding, mid-50s, in a gray vest. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Nicholas said calmly. "Your employee has delayed a legitimate $50,000 deposit, discriminated against my wife based on her identity, and passed confidential materials to a business rival. Caught on camera." Henderson's face paled. Elizabeth tried to speak. "He's mistaken." Karoline stepped forward. "I was told I was a high-risk client due to being controversial. I've been delayed for nearly an hour. Meanwhile, others were given express service. No one asked them for multiple verification steps." She pulled out her phone and showed the images. Thornton, USB, time-stamped. Elizabeth gasped quietly, her lips twitching. Sarah went pale. Mark stepped forward now, quiet but firm. "I saw it too," he said, voice gentle. "Miss Carter gave something to a man in the side hallway. Told me not to report it." Henderson stared at Elizabeth. "Is this true?" I mean, "You're suspended," he said without blinking. "Effective immediately." Elizabeth's eyes widened. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. The security guard stepped forward. "This way, ma'am." She didn't move. Karoline, still calm, still grounded, locked eyes with her. "This wasn't just about a check," she said softly. "You tried to humiliate me because of what I stand for, but I stood. And I'll keep standing." Elizabeth turned away, escorted out through the back door. Karoline exhaled, not with vengeance, with relief. But even in that victory, her heart remained heavy, because she knew there were others, so many others, who didn't have cameras, or husbands who commanded attention, or bank managers who listened. Nicholas placed a hand gently on her back. "You did it," he whispered. Karoline's voice trembled for the first time all day. "We did." The crowd, once silent, began to shift. A man in line stepped forward. "Miss Leavitt, I don't always agree with your politic," he said, "but that was right." A woman nodded behind him. A small wave of murmurs, supportive, sincere, moved through the room. And for the first time that day, Karoline didn't feel alone. The next morning, the news had already spread, not through headlines, not yet, but through whispers, through texts, through quiet phone calls from inside the marble walls of Common Unity Bank. "Elizabeth Carter's been suspended. Apparently, she gave a USB to someone connected to a competitor. Karoline Leavitt caught it, documented the whole thing." By noon, the whispers turned to action. Nicholas and Karoline were called in for a private meeting with the bank's internal affairs director. The photos, the timestamps, Mark's testimony, all of it formed a bulletproof case. The USB, once recovered, contained confidential zoning proposals for Nicholas's upcoming development. Data that had no business being outside the bank's firewall. Elizabeth's access was revoked. Sarah received a formal warning, and Mark promoted. Not because he'd done anything heroic, but because in a sea of complicity, he chose decency. He chose truth. And truth, it had teeth. By week's end, Common Unity Bank issued a public statement. "We regret the recent incident at our DC branch involving the mishandling of confidential information and the mistreatment of a customer based on political identity. We are committed to impartial service for all clients regardless of belief, background, or political affiliation. As a result of an internal investigation, appropriate disciplinary actions have been taken, and new training protocols are being implemented effective immediately." The words were polished, but for Karoline, the real justice didn't come from a press release. It came from witnessing the cracks in the very system that once tried to humiliate her begin to heal. She didn't smile when she read the statement. She didn't clap or cheer. She just closed her laptop and whispered, "Good." 2 days later, Karoline sat on the floor of her living room in New Hampshire. Nico curled into her lap, asleep. The house was quiet. Nicholas sat across the room, leafing through blueprints, occasionally glancing at them with soft eyes. It was a rare, peaceful moment, the kind they'd been fighting for. Caroline stroked Nico's hair and thought of everything that had unfolded: the check, the bias, the stairs, the USB, Thornton, the storm, and then the calm that followed. But this wasn't just her story. It was every person's story who'd ever been made to feel small in a room they had every right to stand in. Every elderly veteran who'd been dismissed because of his beliefs. Every grandmother who was told she didn't understand progress. Every working mother who faced judgment for carrying faith in her voice and a cross around her neck. Caroline looked down at her son. "One day, Nico," she whispered, "you'll walk into a room and be judged. Not for your heart, not for your work, but for your name, for what you believe. And when that day comes, I hope you'll remember this." She glanced toward her phone. On the screen was a photo, Thornton's hand reaching for the USB, and Elizabeth's face caught mid-smile. Proof, but more than that, purpose. "You don't fight injustice by shouting louder," she whispered. "You fight it by standing longer." Nicholas looked up from his chair. "You thinking of turning it into a speech?" Caroline smiled. "I already did, in that bank, when I didn't flinch." He walked over and sat beside her. "I saw the way people looked at you, Caroline. Even the ones who disagreed. They respected you. I wasn't trying to win them over," she said. "I was just trying to stay upright." Nicholas reached over and touched Nico's foot. "Well, you did, and you gave this little guy a legacy worth inheriting." Silence fell again, but it wasn't the kind of silence that echoed in the bank, suffocating and cold. It was a sacred silence, the kind that follows storms, the kind that means something's been rebuilt. And 1 week later, Caroline stood at the podium of a private luncheon in Washington, D.C. No press, no cameras, just a room full of women, mothers, grandmothers, entrepreneurs, pastors, and patriots gathered for a faith and freedom roundtable. She was the final speaker, and when she stepped up, the room hushed. No slogans, no applause lines, just a woman, battle-tested, still standing, speaking softly into a microphone. "A few days ago," she began, "I walked into a bank to deposit a check for my husband. I walked out having exposed a conspiracy designed to hurt our family, but I didn't do it by yelling, or fighting, or demanding special treatment." She paused, eyes scanning the faces. "I did it by being still, by documenting the truth, and by standing in a storm until it passed." Murmurs of agreement, tears, nods. If you're here today, it's because you've probably faced something similar. Maybe in a school, a courtroom, a hospital, a workplace. You've been told to sit down, be quiet, that your faith, your values, your history, they're too political, too controversial, too outdated. She leaned forward. "Don't believe it." The crowd held its breath. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. And if you're standing, really standing, you're already stronger than those trying to push you down. Applause, warm, raw, earned, and Caroline stepped back, not to exit, but to make room for others to rise. If you believe in faith, fairness, and the courage to stand when others try to silence you, this story was for you. Leave a comment below. Have you ever been treated unfairly for your values? Let your voice be heard. Share this video with someone who needs the reminder you are not alone. Subscribe for more stories of truth, courage, and justice, because standing tall starts with standing together.